Here's a question that should have a simple answer, but doesn't. If nobody can afford to buy a home, why do home prices keep going up? Basic economics tells us that when demand falls, prices fall too. Fewer buyers should mean cheaper houses. That's the rule. It's worked for cars, for electronics, for airline tickets. But housing seems to have quietly broken the rule, and broken it for decades.
Wages haven't kept pace. Interest rates have doubled. An entire generation has effectively been priced out of ownership. And still, in city after city, the number on the sign outside the house keeps climbing. Something else is going on here. And once you see it, you can't unsee it.
This isn't a story about greedy landlords, even though they exist. It's not really a story about not enough hammers and nails, even though construction matters. It's a story about how housing quietly became something other than shelter, and why that transformation makes the whole system resistant to getting cheaper, almost by design. Let's start with the part of this that almost nobody talks about: the land underneath the house. You can build more houses. You cannot build more land near a job center, a school district, or a subway stop. That scarcity is permanent, and it's the foundation everything else sits on. But scarcity alone doesn't explain it. After all, plenty of countries have limited land and still manage to keep housing affordable. The bigger issue is what we've chosen to do with the land we have. In most American cities, it is illegal to build anything except a single detached house on the majority of residential land. Not because there isn't demand for anything else, not because it wouldn't be profitable. It's illegal because of zoning codes written decades ago, codes that quietly cap how many homes can exist in the most desirable places. Think about what that means. In a city bursting with people who want to live near downtown, the law itself is limiting the supply of homes that can be built there. That's not a natural market outcome. That's a policy choice made a long time ago that nobody bothers to revisit, because the people it benefits are the people already living there. Which brings us to an uncomfortable truth. The same voters who complain about high housing costs are often the ones voting against new housing in their own neighborhoods. Existing homeowners have every incentive to keep supply tight, because tight supply is exactly what makes their own homes worth more. So the trap isn't just about physical land. It's about a system where the people with the power to add more housing are the same people who benefit from there not being any. But even if every zoning board in the country changed their minds tomorrow, there's a second force working against affordability, one that didn't even exist at scale 20 years ago. Picture a quiet suburban street, rows of near-identical homes, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a small yard. For most of the 20th century, homes like these were bought by families. Today, a growing share of them are bought by firms, investment funds that never plan to live in them at all. After the 2008 housing crash, a wave of massive companies started buying up foreclosed single-family homes by the tens of thousands, converting them into rental portfolios. What used to be a starter home for a young family became a line item on a hedge fund balance sheet. This changes the math in a fundamental way. A family buying a home has to weigh what they can actually afford to pay each month. An institutional buyer is often comparing that same house to other investments, stocks, bonds, other real estate, and is willing to pay a premium simply to keep that capital parked somewhere that reliably appreciates. They don't need the house to be affordable. They need it to be a good asset. When a young couple bids against a firm with billions of dollars in reserve and no mortgage approval process to wait on, the couple usually loses. Not because the firm outbid them by some enormous margin. Often it's a modest premium, just enough.
But modest premiums add up, home after home, across entire zip codes, and they quietly reset what normal price even means in that market. And here's the part that should really give you pause. These firms have no incentive to ever sell at a discount. They can afford to hold a vacant unit for months, waiting for the right price, in a way an individual family never could. A family needs to sell now, at whatever the market will bear. An institution can simply wait the market out. Multiply that pattern across enough properties, and you get something strange. Neighborhoods with homes standing empty, right next to people desperate to buy, in a market where prices somehow keep climbing anyway. You'd think, at least, that raising interest rates would fix this. Higher rates should mean fewer buyers, weaker demand, falling prices. That's what happened in 2008. So why didn't it happen this time? Here's the twist almost nobody expected. When interest rates shot up, home prices barely blinked. In some markets, they kept rising. The explanation is almost counterintuitive. Higher rates didn't just push buyers out, they pushed sellers out too. That created a strange kind of gridlock. Buyers who could still qualify for a mortgage were desperate for homes. But the supply of homes coming onto the market shrank because owners had every reason to hold on to what they had. Fewer sellers, competing buyers, and prices that refused to fall the way textbook economics predicted.
Millions of homeowners had locked in ultra-low mortgage rates in prior years. Selling their home and buying a new one at today's much higher rate would mean trading a great deal for a terrible one, even if the new house was smaller or further from work. So many of them simply didn't sell. They stayed put. It's a reminder that supply and demand isn't just about how many homes exist. It's about how many people are willing to let go of the one they already have. And right now, an entire generation of homeowners has very good reasons not to. Which raises an even bigger question. If land is scarce, if institutions keep buying, if homeowners won't sell, who exactly benefits from housing staying this expensive? And is that a bug in the system? Or is it working exactly the way certain people need it to? For most families that own one, a home isn't just a place to live. It's the single largest asset they'll ever hold, often worth more than every other asset combined. That fact changes how an entire society thinks about housing prices. A rising home value doesn't just sound good on paper. For millions of existing homeowners, it is retirement security. It's the down payment their kids will eventually inherit. It's collateral for a business loan or the safety net for a medical emergency. Falling home prices, from that perspective, aren't a relief. They're a threat to the one asset a family has spent decades paying into. So the system isn't broken by accident. It's stable in a strange and uncomfortable way. Stable for the people already inside it, and increasingly locked against the people trying to get in. Which leads to an obvious question. Has anyone actually solved this? This is the piece that rarely gets said out loud. A huge portion of the population has a direct financial interest in home prices never falling. Not landlords, not investment firms. Ordinary people who happen to buy a house at the right time and who now depend on that house continuing to appreciate. That creates a political reality that's very hard to shift. Politicians who campaign on genuinely crashing home prices to fix affordability are, in effect, campaigning against the net worth of the majority of homeowning voters. It's a much easier sell to talk about building more housing somewhere else, or offering buyer assistance programs that help people afford high prices, rather than doing anything that would actually bring those prices down. A few places have. Vienna built and maintained enormous amounts of public and cooperative housing over the last century,
taking a huge share of homes out of the speculative market entirely. Because so much of the city's housing isn't there to be flipped for profit, prices across the whole market stay far more stable than in comparable cities. Tokyo took a different approach. They made it relatively easy to build. Zoning rules are simpler and more permissive nationwide, so when demand for housing in a neighborhood rises, new supply can actually respond quickly. The result is a city where home prices, adjusted for inflation, have stayed remarkably flat for decades, even as the population and economy grew. Neither approach is a perfect model to copy wholesale. Both involve trade-offs, political fights, and years of sustained policy commitment. But they prove something important. This isn't some unsolvable law of economics. It's a set of choices. Different choices produce different outcomes.
Which means the current situation, however entrenched it feels, isn't inevitable. It's the result of specific decisions about zoning, about who's allowed to buy, about what a home is supposed to represent, made over and over again by people who mostly benefit from things staying exactly as they are. So where does that leave the renter, standing outside a house they'll probably never afford? It leaves them inside a system that was never actually designed to make housing cheap. It was designed, gradually and mostly by accident, to make housing a reliable store of wealth for the people who already own it. Scarcity by zoning, institutional capital treating homes as assets, homeowners locked in place by their own low rates, an entire electorate with a financial stake in prices never falling. None of these forces are conspiracies. Each one, on its own, is a rational response to the incentives in front of it. But together, they add up to a market that behaves less like a marketplace for shelter and more like a machine for preserving the wealth of whoever got in early. The real question isn't whether this can change. Vienna and Tokyo prove that it can. The real question is whether enough people, and enough of the politicians who represent them, are willing to accept short-term discomfort for a system that actually works for the next generation, instead of just the current one. Until that changes, the paradox holds. Home prices keep climbing, affordability keeps shrinking, and the house with the for sale sign out front keeps sitting there, priced for someone who, more and more, doesn't exist.